Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin, and Alyssa did a great job filling in last week, but I'm glad to be back with you this Monday, Mike.
Okay.
But we have some spicy questions this week. Let's get right into it. And I know the first one is from our friend, Mr. Negative. You guys know who we're talking about, Mousetown, who asks, what's your take on the Muss Bus video posted by the athletic department? I like the simple explanation. Muss is not leaving. Simple is usually better.
You know, you can take that any way you want. There's like 12 different explanations that I've heard from different people. You know, one of them is Hunter Yurachek was just trying to be funny. He was just trying to put humor into it. Doesn't really mean anything other than that. Hunter Yurachek was taking a shot at the fans who keep talking about this and saying, it's funny, he's still here. Or maybe he was taking a shot at the media, people like you and me who've been talking about it. Or maybe he was taking a shot at Muselman saying, you ought to say something about this. Or it could mean none of that stuff. Here's the issue. Until Eric Muselman himself makes some kind of an acknowledgement that he's going to be the basketball coach here next year with all these rumors, I'm telling you, this stuff is going to continue. You can consider it annoying. You can not like it. You can be a fan that says people need to shut up or whatever. It's out there. And I'll say this again. It's not necessarily me because I don't have sources telling me this. But I know people in the media that I trust, and I know they do have sources. I know who their sources are. And I'm telling you, this is not coming from fans. It's coming from people inside the coaching profession, and it's not SEC coaches. I'd be more skeptical if it was a bunch of SEC coaches trying to undermine what Muselman's doing.
Yeah.
Make it look like, oh, his situation is unstable, it'll hurt his portal transfer stuff. But the people that are talking about this are far removed from here and from the SEC. They're just around the country coaching. You know, you find out certain people saying certain things, and nobody's saying he's gone, but they still say there's a possibility he could be gone. And the point is, until he says he's not gone, he says, hey, I'm here, I don't know what this has been all about, there's going to be these rumors.
Yeah.
And you might as well get used to it.
Yeah, I go back to what I said on the show a couple of weeks ago when we've had conversations about is Muselman staying or is he leaving. Porter Moser shut down all the rumors of him being possibly rumored to take the DePaul job and things like that. He said, these are rumors. I am staying at Oklahoma. I am here. What raised concerns from me, and I even said this on social media, so this is not any new information, is that as big of a social media guy that Eric Muselman is, to not have him or any of his staff acknowledge the video raised some questions for me. You're on social media. You like your social media persona. And I get what people are saying. Courtney, he hasn't been on social media at all really much this year. I get that. But then when you get Josh Cohen to commit and all of a sudden you're liking tweets about it, you're retweeting stuff, you're active, to not have any sort of reaction to what Hunter Yurachek posted when it pertained to you seems a little off to me.
And we've also gotten word that they supposedly have 2 or 3 more guys ready to say, we'll come, and they're holding off on that. Now, somebody suggested to me that they're just being more careful. They know they had a problem last year with bringing in some people that didn't work out, so they're being extra careful about people that they offer. So even though they may have some guys that are willing to come, they're checking out their background to make sure this is going to work out. Okay, that's a possible explanation, but it creates the impression that maybe, you know, there's just so many questions out there. And here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's not annoying that people keep coming up with these questions, but there's a way to diffuse all of it. And that is for the person himself to say, what's going on here? This is stupid. I'm here. I don't know what you're talking about. And it would be very simple, very easy. Why does he not just do that?
That's my question.
It would end all of this.
Come out and say, hey, I'm staying. Everything's great. Just dispel it yourself. That's my thing. Is I feel like I'd feel a lot better if he pulled a Porter Moser and said, I'm staying at Arkansas.
Okay.
So that's how we feel about that. I appreciate you for putting a question in from Mousetown, but we're moving on from that conversation. Bama Wildhog wants to know, how am I supposed to deal with my knothead neighbors who are already bragging that Oates is going to a Final Four while Muselman can't get past the Elite Eight, and not even that this season?
I think it's real simple. Here's what you say to them. You say, well, I'm glad you're happy, and just be prepared to switch Nick Saban for Oates, because your days of winning a national championship and dominating football and going to the national championship and having a good that's over. You may be good, but nobody's going to stop and think about this logically. No one's ever done what Nick Saban did. Bear Bryant came close, but nobody's ever done what he did over that period of time. They're not going to duplicate that. Are you kidding me? The days of being right up there in the top 2 or 3 every year and winning the SEC or being second and getting into that championship game and then getting to the playoff almost every year, those days are over. So you tell them that and say, I hope you enjoy winning some basketball games in the tournament, because that's what you're swapping.
So you don't believe in their new coach?
It's not a matter of believing him. He's not Nick Saban. Nobody is.
Ooh.
He's not going to do what Saban did. It's just not. Nobody would. People acted like when Saban stepped down, he was like, okay, the guy stepped down, big deal. What, are you kidding me? He's the best college coach of all time. No one's ever duplicated what he did. As I said, Bear came close, but he didn't do that, and he didn't do it under today's system, which makes it even more difficult. They will not even come close in football to doing what they've done over the last decade. It's not going to happen. They'll be good. They won't be that good. So they're swapping. They're swapping maybe being good in basketball for being good in football, and we'll see how they enjoy that. That's what I would say to my neighbors if I lived in Alabama.
That is a hot take right there, Mike. We'll check in with you maybe in a couple of seasons and see how that take is going for you. Marty Bird's Proxy says, I'm not a big fan of Nate Oates at Alabama, but if I'm being honest, that has more to do with his success, particularly against the Hogs, than what kind of guy he is, though he doesn't seem very scrupulous. Can you think of an opposing coach, any sport, who our fans despise, but was actually a pretty good man?
You got to go all the way back, and I realize some fans won't know this, so I got to kind of explain it to them. But if you go back to the Eddie Sutton years, and Texas had a coach named Abe Lemons, and Abe took shots at Arkansas fans all the time, called them rednecks. I remember he made this statement one time that he said, when I go to Barnhill, and he said, I'm looking at some of those fans up in the stands. I know I'm looking at somebody that if they could capture me after a game, they would drive me out into the woods, tie me to a tree, and cut my throat. That's they're crazy. Those people up there are murderers. And he was joking, but he was saying this stuff, and it was making the fans furious. So I understand that they didn't like him, but I knew him. First of all, he was from Oklahoma. He wasn't any more country than Arkansas is. And he didn't ever fit at Texas. They didn't like him. They didn't like him saying this stuff. They wanted a more sophisticated coach. And I said to Abe Lemons one time, I said, have you ever considered the possibility that if we could do a swap, that Eddie Sutton would absolutely fit the hierarchy at Texas a lot better because he's more sophisticated and he doesn't say the things you say and he's kind of typical and you're kind of redneckish and say all these crazy things, and in Arkansas, they'd love you. And he said, yeah. He said, I would swap. I'd do it. After Texas fired him, and they fired him for a lot of the stuff that he said and did, they didn't like it, so they ran him off. He went to Oklahoma City University and coached for a while, and he went back to Oklahoma City, and I went over and interviewed him, spent about half a day with the guy and talked to him. And I'm just telling you, after that was over, I was absolutely 100% convinced that if the situation had been different, Arkansas fans would have loved this guy, because he was one of them in the way he thought about things. But because he was at Texas, they hated him.
Well, absolutely.
They never knew. And I tried to tell people at the time, we didn't have social media like we do now, but I tried to tell some of the fans I knew, you don't really know this guy. I hate him, he's a jerk. And I said, he's really not.
The funny thing is, I feel like it's all with those coaches of people going, oh, I really don't like him, I really don't like him. But if he was at Arkansas, he would fit the persona, and everything you've told me about him, I'm like, I feel like he would fit Arkansas fans really well.
The fans would have loved him.
Exactly. Hey, you'd have to go in an alternate dimension.
If he said all that thing, he could have said some stuff about Texas Longhorn fans that would have had our fans go, because he lived there. He knew what they were like, stuffed shirts, what do they used to call them, tea sippers. I mean, all these fancy schmancy things they believe in, and they're up here and they're politically correct. He would have taken shots at them like you wouldn't believe, and our fans would have loved it.
And I think some of that is he's doing that for their fan base too.
He
so if he
is.
was at Arkansas, he would do it for the Hog fan base.
He absolutely would do it, only it would be real here. It wasn't real there. He was just taking shots because they were the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. TN Rich says, your recommendation to eliminate conference championship games and expand March Madness to 128 teams has all upsides and no downsides. Wow. This is the first person I've heard that agrees with you on this, so that's crazy. I hated it when the conferences started championship tourneys. The regular season record should determine the conference champion. Only exception is in the case of a tie. Then a one-game playoff should settle the matter. Okay, I like that. Let's do the smart thing and make the NCAA tourney the crucible of determining who's elite and who's not by getting rid of useless conference tourneys and expanding the NCAA tourney to 128 teams.
Yeah, so there's not much I can add to that. I agree with him 100%. He and I are probably out on the edge there. I don't think there are a lot of people that would agree. You don't agree. Most people don't agree. Let me explain myself a little bit on this, and maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Because when I was growing up in my hometown, it didn't matter what the sport, but our sports were football, basketball, and baseball in high school, and everybody loved that. You were in a district. The only way you ever advanced to the playoffs was winning your district. If you didn't win it, you didn't go. And the entire time I was growing up, Morton went a few times in basketball, they never went in baseball, and they never went in football. There was a rumor one time that in the late 30s, long before I was born, there was a school in Morton's district that won, but then they later got into the playoffs and they got eliminated at some point, and they had found out they had played an ineligible player, so they declared them ineligible, and they supposedly told that school, you have to send your district championship trophy to Morton. And the rumor was they sent it, but it was a quarterback with an arm drawn back passing the ball, and they broke the arm off of it because they were mad, and then they sent it. So when Morton gets this thing, they look at this broken arm, and they went, well, so they just put it in the closet. And periodically, people would go and get somebody to open the closet just so they could look at the one district championship trophy in the history of the school. But it was yucky, so they just kept it in the closet. They didn't put it in the trophy case. Now, my junior year, ending my sophomore year, going into the spring of my sophomore year, after first year I started, we were excited because we knew we were going to win District 2 AA the next year. We just knew we were going to win it. And all of a sudden, toward the end of the school year, we get this nasty surprise. They are moving us to District 3 AA, where Denver City is playing. Denver City was one of the best teams in the state. We knew we couldn't beat them. They beat people 88-6, 97-2. Just beat people crazy and ran all over them. The best we could do was play them hard, which we ended up doing. We were 8-8 with them in the half when I was a junior. It ended up 36-8. It was 16-6 at half of the second game when I was a senior. We played them, and they beat us 44-6. We couldn't beat them. We didn't get to go. And I remember my senior year, we won our last 3 games, and we were feeling good about ourselves, and we knew we were better. We'd improved. And we just said, if 2 teams could go, we would get to play Freona, the winner of District 2 AA, and Denver City would go play the runner-up in District 2 AA. And we can beat those guys. So we went over to watch the game, and Denver City lost to them. And the whole time we're driving home, we're going, if we had been able to play them, we would have beat them. Denver City just overlooked them. So it's frustration that of the inability to look ahead and say, you got to let more teams in the playoffs. Now, one of my own sons, I had a discussion with him last night because he hates the NCAA tournament, and he hates it because of upsets. He's a big NBA guy, and he likes the best 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5 stuff.
Okay, yeah.
And he's saying the opposite of what I'm saying. He's saying reduce the number of teams in the playoffs and have them do the best 2 out of 3.
Okay.
Because he wants to eliminate all these upsets. And I'm telling him, you're stupid. The upsets are what's fun.
Yeah.
And the more you stick in there, the more it happens, and the more I like it because I'm for these underdogs that didn't quite make it and never got a chance.
Well, the whole reason I was so against it is because I like 64 teams, because my point to you was that you expand it to 128, and that's just like so many teams. 64.
But there'd be even more upsets.
No, it just makes it makes it to me very elite right now. And so that's why I think 64 teams is great. But my other point to you, and I don't know if I even mentioned this last week, but it makes even more sense to mention it now. You said conference tournaments should go away because a team can't win 5 games in a row, and get that automatic bid. And NC State did it. NC State, look at them now. Look at them now.
No,
Mike.
I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought you said that.
No,
I apologize.
I said I don't like conference tournaments because they don't mean anything for the teams that win them. A team like Tennessee's already won it.
Right. Yeah.
So what happens to them? Well,
Well, it
Auburn,
gives a chance.
look at Auburn. Auburn wins the stupid conference tournament. What do they got? A little trophy they can walk around going, we won the conference tournament. Yeah, you were also one and done in the NCAAs. And Alabama, who you hate, is in the Final Four.
That's what's the beauty of March Madness. That's why it's called March Madness. And that's why a team like NC State, they've made it this far. Who knows what would have happened if NC State wasn't given the opportunity to win the conference championship? Who knows
They'd
if they might have been
in. They
might be. Well, if you expanded it to
Yes,
128, they would
be in.
absolutely be in.
So,
but that's the beauty of it, right? Is that they've won a conference championship, and now they've done what so many people thought they couldn't do.
they could still do it anyway under my system.
Well, they could, but 128 teams is too much.
Nah.
Too much.
Put them all in there.
No,
how many
no.
of them? 256.
Stop.
Whatever.
You're
Put 'em all
talking
in.
craziness.
I like it.
We're going to agree to disagree
Everybody
on this
goes
one.
to the playoffs.
We're going to agree to disagree on
My
this one.
hometown this past week, because they've changed it in Texas. 4 teams go from each district. They were fourth, and they won 2 playoff games. We never got to go, and we finished second every year.
I'm sorry. They clearly the high school football in Texas is a
No,
lot
they
different.
figured it out.
Well, they did,
Put
right?
more people in.
Okay, and they're figuring out in the college football playoffs too. I've been saying for years they need to let more teams in because I think it should be more like the fun in March should be in football as well, right? But March Madness, 64 teams is great. You see the madness happening, and look at NC State. That's my example.
Okay.
I'm done.
Well, I got this guy on my side. So.
All right, you got this guy on his side. And I think the next question might be from the same guy as well. TN Rich again says, the sweep of LSU was great. Too many corn dogs.
Actually, this is Eddie Lynn. Somehow our graphics
That's
got
okay.
messed up.
I thought so as well. So, okay, Eddie Lynn says, the sweep of LSU was great. Too many corn dogs at Baum. I'm glad they went home mad, but have you ever seen anything like DVH putting a true freshman on the mound in his college debut in the 8th inning of an SEC game with a 2-run lead?
No, I haven't. And at the time, I was thinking, is he nuts? Has he lost his mind? Think about this, Hunter Dietz, and I've been hearing about him.
But he's so good.
I've been hearing about him, the
So good.
rehab and all, but he's never pitched in a college game, ever. And he's out there in a game in which you can sweep LSU, and you got a 2-run lead in the 8th inning. Are you serious? And he got 2 outs. He did that. But he also left the bases loaded when Will McIntyre came in to bail him out. So it could have gone the other way. In retrospect, yes, it worked out. Because what's going to happen now is because he's been in that pressure situation, you don't have to fool around with this playing a midweek game first stuff. And I think we're going to see him against Ole Miss, and I think he'll probably be even better.
Yeah.
So it worked out. There's a lot of things about this season where Dave Van Horn has taken some real chances, and he's gotten bailed out by people. You know.
I think that shows the trust that they have in Hunter Dietz, especially when you looked at him coming out of high school. I mean, he was just a top pitcher, and so I think there's some trust there. We don't see what goes on in practice.
Well, he's
maybe
huge. He's like 6'4", 230 or something.
Yeah, he doesn't look like
He's
a
a
freshman.
beast.
Let's be honest about that. But yeah, there's a lot of things that just seems to have worked out, like the Will McIntyre things in general, with him
Will
writing his
McIntyre
name.
coming back out in the 9th after he'd already pitched the day before. I thought, are you nuts?
Everyone thought that he was nuts. I mean, but Will McIntyre apparently wrote his own name in on
He
the
did.
lineup.
So and he got through and was in a real jam at the end and got lucky with a double play there at the end. So I mean, it works out that way.
Sometimes it does. It's baseball, right? That's what Dave Van Horn says. Sometimes things just work out that way in that sport. Revolution says Razorback fans have every reason to be enjoying baseball season. Who are the top 5 Razorback pitchers and hitters that you've seen over the years of covering the Hogs?
Okay, that's so subjective. Nobody's going to agree on this. So I got some graphics.
I think people are going to agree with you. I looked at yours before the show started, and I think they're great, but go over them.
Okay, the top Razorback hitters, I'd say Jeff King, Heston Kjerstad, Andrew Benintendi, Ryan Lundquist, and Kendrick Moore. And in no particular order. I'm not going to rank this guy. I can't do that. They're just all really good, and there's about 5 more that could have been in there.
And for the pitchers or the hitters?
Yeah, that's for the hitters, and now the pitchers, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go with Kevin Kopps. How can you not have Kevin Kopps in there?
If he was not in your top 5, I'd be mad. So.
Yeah, then Blaine Knight. Remember they had that undefeated season?
Yeah.
Scott Tabor. Charlie Boyce. We all remember Charlie Boyce. The guy could pitch like every day. He could just pitch all 3 games of the series. He had a rubber arm. And Nick Schmidt. All of those guys were good. Now, I will say, I may have to change that list when the season is over because I didn't put Hagen Smith in there because the year's not over.
Right.
But I think he's going to move into that list.
He absolutely should.
Based on what we've seen.
I was about to say, I was looking back on the question and I said, he says you've seen over the years. So technically this season's still, exactly. Technically the season's still going on, but I think you got to add Hagen to that after this season. Edward Clutch says, watching the baseball series against Auburn, I noticed several ads for their NIL on the advertising board behind home plate. Also, you can't drive 100 yards into the state of Mississippi before seeing billboards for the Ole Miss Grove Collective. Why isn't the U of A doing simple things like advertising NIL behind home plate and putting up some billboards? I would be willing to bet that if you polled 10 random fans, at least 7 of them couldn't tell you what in the world Arkansas Edge is.
Well, we were just able to get an interview, right?
With Eric Bauer, right?
Who's heading up the Edge, and that helps. I said last week, and I still believe it, they got caught behind. And why did they get caught behind or caught off guard? Because when NIL started, they ran it the way the NCAA said to run it. There are a bunch of other schools like Tennessee and A&M and a bunch of others just started doing whatever they wanted. And I think when Arkansas thought eventually these schools are going to get caught, they're going to get punished, and then when they caught them and the NCAA tried to do something about it, they just filed lawsuits, and now all that stuff is tied up in a restraining order. And so there are no rules right now on NIL, nothing. You could do whatever you wanted right now. There's just no rules. So I think at that point, Arkansas was already working toward getting its Edge program going, but this just increased the need for it even more. And so there's going to be a catch-up period. But I think there's a saving grace here, according to what I've been told, which is Hunter Yurachek is fully aware of this issue. And so what he's been doing lately is he's been very careful with his money so that he can make sure that it goes into football and basketball. And baseball apparently has their own situation anyway. They're fine. But football and basketball is where the NIL money needs to go. And for instance, if you fired Mike Neighbors, you'd have to pay him a buyout. Well, they didn't fire him, so you can take that money that you were going to pay for a buyout and you can put it into basketball NIL money, or whatever you want to do with it. I think they're going to catch up. Here's the problem, though. A lot of fans are taking, I read this all the time, and it's backward thinking. They're taking the approach, well, start winning something and then we'll give you NIL money. It's the other way around, people. If you're struggling in football, you need NIL even more. So you want to sit here and be stubborn because they're not winning the way you want and you don't want to give any money. And so what do you want them, just to stay terrible? Because they don't have the NIL money and people are outbidding them for players all the time. Now, hopefully this whole NIL thing will get solved and it won't continue where you're bidding for players. But right now we're in the middle of that. And never did they need your money any more than they do right now. Not just boosters. They need average fans giving $5, $10, whatever. And if you can just look at it that way, rather than sit home and get on the internet and complain about it, invest yourself in it a little bit and it will pay off.
Absolutely. And the other argument I've been hearing as well is, well, I give so much money to go to the games and pay concessions and all of this stuff. I pay so much money to actually enjoy the sporting events. Why don't you go back to the Waltons or the Tysons or, any of these big names? Well, guys, you can't keep going to the same well. That's the problem, is that you can't go to those same people and keep asking, oh, give us another million, give us another million.
That's the common thinking out there. It's not my job to come up with the money because I'm not rich, so there's always some other rich guy that's supposed to come up with the money. And if you want to sit there and live in your dream world and just assume because you think Johnny Tyson should double what he's giving, or you could name any of these guys.
Any of them, yeah.
They should just double or triple what they're doing. Well, you're not him. It's not your money.
No.
You don't have a right to tell the guy what he's going to do.
And these people have already donated to certain things. I mean, that's the problem. Is that how many times are you going to get annoyed with the university going, please give us another million, please give us another million?
And the Edge thing is a new thing, and it's a way for people that haven't been donating to donate.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to reach people that aren't season ticket holders, people that haven't been giving money to the foundation. And they're not asking you for a lot. If you just give them $5, $10, whatever.
Yeah.
If they can get all the fans all over the state doing that, they could generate millions.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to do.
And that was the point that Eric Bauer made this past weekend. He said if you took the 11,000 fans that were at one of the baseball games in that series against LSU, if you took 11,000 fans, he doubled it by how much money they give. I mean, you would get $2 million easy. You know, I mean, look at that. Easy if you just donate $25, which is the base membership, I guess. So I get his thinking there of like, look, if we can get people to donate, we could actually be competitive here. And so I think the more stubborn fans are, the more they're going to see Arkansas get left in the dust.
I don't want to be hypercritical of fans, and I don't want this to be applied to all fans, but what I'm seeing right now from a lot of Razorback fans on the internet, they're hypocrites. They're criticizing other people for things they won't do themselves, and I'm done with those people.
Yeah.
I'm really tired of dealing with them because all they want to do is sit back and complain and say what other people should do, and this is going to come up again, believe me.
Oh no, I know it will, and I do
question.
like Edward Clutch's idea of putting it behind, behind home plate and everything, and having that kind of more advertising would be great. But they have been doing a lot of advertising too. But again, more will always help, and we have more NIL comments for sure. WV Hog Fan says, apparently the NCAA is not willing to place any limitations on schools regarding NIL. What is the chance that the top conferences leave the NCAA and form their own organization where maybe more control can be placed on NIL? If this occurred, how long would it be before those limits would be challenged in the courts? And then there's another comment on this, right, from Dr. Starks, who says the AD sent fans an email stating some of this. My question is, who's to stop a school from funding NIL however they want? Doesn't seem like there's any enforceable legislation about it. It all reeks of screwing the fans over for more of their hard-earned money.
We've been talking about this for about 3 or 4 weeks now, ever since Charlie Baker, the NCAA, and for a while I thought maybe they were going to have to dump the NCAA, but Baker is different from these other NCAA. He doesn't want the NCAA to be replaced, and he's come up with the best solution I've seen so far, which is to create an upper division of Division I, what's BCS or whatever they call it now. Hate the names. I wish they'd just say Division I. An upper division, who knows how many teams it would be, but you would have to agree to fund approximately $30,000 for each scholarship. Might be more, might be less, but they would have to agree upon it. And what that would do is give every scholar, because look, this NIL can't continue the way it is, because there are too many athletes on the women's side that aren't getting anything. And they've already filed lawsuits. So they're going to have a Title IX mess on their hands if they don't address this. So this would give the same amount to everybody. So it would eliminate a school using the collective. It would eliminate A&M to saying, our collective is bigger than Arkansas's collective. You can get more. No, you would all get the same. They might have to adjust it for the cost of living wherever your school is. But it'll all be apparently close to the same. And I think that's doable if you can get everybody to agree to do this. There's still going to be some things that have to be resolved even if they do this. What do you do about the super duper athletes that still can command a $2 million NIL? You may not be able to stop that. That may just be something you live with, but I think it's less of a problem for you, like we saw with the football team when your offensive linemen are getting food, is essentially for their NIL. And KJ Jefferson, the quarterback's getting $750,000. They didn't like that. So how do you eliminate that? Well, if you got $30,000 or $40,000 a year instead of food, I think you'd be a little happier, and you might be understanding that your quarterback or your running back might command a lot more. So I think there's ways to deal with this, and I think it's going to be done through the NCAA. I think the Congress may step in with some legislation to help. The main thing is to eliminate the buying of players in recruiting. for Tennessee to what they've just done, I believe, is gone out and got the top quarterback in the country and offered him $1 gajillion. What Texas did when they offered, you know, what's his name? Forgotten this guy's name now.
Arch Manning. Sorry, I was like, what?
When they came in and
what are we
offered Arch
talking
Manning
about?
$2 million, and he came in and didn't even play.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's insane, crazy stuff. This would eliminate some of that stuff because you're going to, you can't. I think if they do what Charlie Baker is suggesting, then you could go back and impose your rule. Yes, you can still make $2 million, but you have to work that deal out with somebody else once you get here. We're not allowed to offer that to you in recruiting. And right now you can do anything you want. So again, we need rules to prevent one school that has more money than another getting a player simply, and then you got to address the portal thing, which is they're stealing. I mean, talk to these basketball coaches right now. They're going to press conferences after their NCAA tournament games and saying, I'm having to keep my team ready to play. At the same time, I'm having to deal with portal people leaving the team and going into the portal.
Yeah.
And then I'm having to go into the portal. That's insane that they're doing this right now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. The portal coupled with NIL is just a mess for everybody, and every coach will tell you that. I mean, my dad talks about it all the time, how it's getting so bad to the point of where even in D2, you're like, what is happening? You know, I mean, you wouldn't think it's affecting D2 and D3, but it is.
And again, a lot of these yo-yos are saying, well, they're just becoming like professional sports, which they've been allowed to do no. In professional sports, you can't just switch teams like that.
No, you have salary
Dallas
caps.
Cowboys, Jerry Jones can't go, boy, I like this quarterback over here that the Chiefs have, that Patrick Mahomes guy. I'm just going to offer him more money and get him over here. You can't do that. But you can do it at the NCAA level, and that's got to be eliminated.
Yeah, I think going back to what WV Hog Fan says about a different, top conferences leaving the NCAA and creating their own, I think you bring into the question of the courts bringing down the hammer again and just saying, nope, you can't do that. And then they're facing the same issue that the NCAA
Well, they're going to have to
had.
do something where everybody agrees.
Right, and exactly. And I think you almost, when you have that sort of situation, let the courts come down on you. Say,
I don't think you'll have the lawsuits if they do it right, because you will have to, in order
but
to.
you might have some
I don't
lawsuits.
think you're going to get it because they're going to have to sign contracts. These players are going to have to sign contracts, and when they sign the contract, they agree that they can't come in, play for you for a year, and then jump to another school because they got more NIL money offered.
I think that's why I'm saying it, that if you do it right, you kind of almost say, sue us, go ahead. We'll deal with the courts, because the more precedent you have legally there, the better grounds you have to stand on. And right now, that's just what we're talking about, is that there's no precedent. There's no precedent. That's why it's all free-for-all right now.
Right.
And so we need some precedent legally as well. And that's when I say, if you create something like that, you just say, bring it on. Bring it on. Let's take us to court. Let's see if you guys can have a leg to stand on.
You got a little too much Kim Mulkey in you.
That's the first time I've ever heard you relate me to Kim Mulkey.
That's what she does. Bring it on. Bring it on. I'm Mulkey. That's what you're trying to do.
I'm
saying they're not going to sue anyway, but you're saying, I want you to sue.
Yeah, because
I'll take you on.
Because look, if they lose, then you have precedent. You have precedent. Okay. You have precedent. That's what matters. I know lawyers there also would say the same thing. They could weigh in on this conversation as well. Hot Dogger weighs in on this NIL conversation. Will universities and colleges have to raise tuition to meet NIL demands? I'm sure NIL for now is mainly from private sponsors, but I think it will come to a point that in order to stay competitive, schools may have to contribute from their own pocketbooks.
Every once in a while we get a question that nobody's ever addressed. It just pops up out of the blue. And this is one of those things where I read it and I read it and I read it and I went, wow, think about what he's saying. Now, most universities charge a student activity fee. I don't know if Arkansas does. They didn't used to, but they may now. I'm not sure. But they would charge a student activity fee to help athletics. And the theory behind this is, okay, I'm enrolling, I'm a student, I'm going to go to class and I'm going to do everything, but I need some entertainment too. And they got all this stuff on campus that will entertain me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pay a student activity fee. It's a fee to allow other things to happen on campus so I can be entertained.
I paid that at Florida.
Okay, and sports is part of that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, what are these athletes basically saying about NIL? They're saying, hey, we're out here entertaining everybody, and they get entertained and they pay money, but we don't get squat. So how about this idea? When you pay your student activity fee, 50 or $100 of that goes to da-da-da-da-da, an NIL payment. Now, if you've got 30,000 students and you charge $100, you know how much money that is? It's almost $3 million. That you could just throw into your NIL collective.
Sure.
So why wouldn't they do that? You're charging students for the right to go watch them.
Yeah, some of my student activities fees when I was in college went to the student government. And so the student government used it to pay different things at our university. So like when they brought in like cool concerts and stuff like that, they would use that money to pay for those things, pay for extra things. So I don't know. I think you'd have to look at it. You'd probably have to charge more. You'd have to break it down.
He's going beyond boosters and all of that and saying, hey, the school itself should, not the athletic department, the school itself, because the school benefits. I'm telling you, the University of Arkansas doesn't have 30,000 students just because it's cool. They have 30,000 students because they've had athletics. If you eliminated athletics at the University of Arkansas, I promise you over a period of 8-10 years, the enrollment would drop in half.
Yeah,
Kids would stay in Central Arkansas and not come up here because they don't have the Razorbacks.
I just think of some of the student body, and I remember this at Florida. There was a lot of the student body that didn't attend the sporting events and didn't want to go to,
I know.
They weren't interested in sports. So those people, what do you say to them? Like, I want my student activities fee to go to things that I will enjoy, which is what it went to.
The school is looking at what benefits itself, the school itself. And athletes playing and competing benefits the university. It increases enrollment. It gets people to come on campus and spend money all over the place. How about the town? Nobody's even thought about this. Do you know how much Fayetteville, the business people in Fayetteville benefit from a weekend of college football or a weekend of baseball that we just have? I know people that run businesses.
So maybe those guys should donate some of the money for their business.
There may be a community involvement in NIL.
That's maybe what I think, besides going to the students first, that some of the students will go, if you poll 10 students on campus, you might get 5 that say we don't care about sports.
I'm telling you, you're coming into a school, most of those students wouldn't even look at that. They'd go, oh yeah, I got charged. This was part of my tuition. They're not even going to pay attention.
I paid attention to it because I was part of student government. I had to decide what that money went to. Now, if I was on student government at Arkansas, I would say, hey, maybe we should consider putting this money into some athletics. But I know just based on my experience.
Maybe the school itself should charge its faculty a fee.
Whoa, what? Now we're getting a little crazy. I know there's some faculty members that watch. So
I'm just telling you, part of why they're here at any school is because of athletics. You take it away, and I promise you the enrollment goes down. People would start going to junior colleges close to home a lot more if you didn't have athletics on campus, I'm telling you. How many kids would stay in Central Arkansas and go to schools around there instead of coming up here? How many students would stay in Texas instead of coming all the way up here because their parents were alums and they want to do what their parents did? I'm just telling you.
But they also go to school. A lot of them go to the school for getting an education.
They do. But what I'm telling you, athletics is a big part of why you have 30,000 people at this school.
Sure, athletics is a good portion of it, but there's a lot of people that go to university to get an education. Alyssa wants to phone a friend. Okay, Alyssa, phone a friend. Speak loudly so they can hear you.
I'm just saying, I think that there are people, to Mike's point, I went to Florida State because I wanted to go to a big-time football school.
Okay,
so Alyssa.
I had no affiliation to that.
See, you're making my point.
Alyssa wanted to go to school because it was a big-time football school. And I'll tell you why I wanted to go to Florida. It was mainly because they had a great journalism program, and that's why I wanted to go to Florida. Listen, I wanted to go to Florida because I knew I was going to be set up for success.
The athletics there had nothing to do with it.
Well, a little bit. I mean, my dad liked Billy Donovan. We hung out with him. There's a whole other story there, but it was partly because of the education.
I'm just telling you, this is a new concept that I never thought about. And the school itself, what he's saying is the school itself should fund more of this.
Okay.
Not boosters, not fans, the school itself, because they benefit from it.
Okay, well, listen, all right, Jacob is over here also saying.
Schools cannot give money to the collective.
There you go. Schools cannot give money to the collective. Jacob says, Jacob Morris came in. We have the peanut gallery giving us things.
No.
The schools cannot give.
We're talking about if they come up with this new version where everybody gets the same. We're talking about everybody gets the same money. you're helping schools raise money for their collective to get to that certain point. Some schools will have no problem meeting their collective. Others will.
Right, but what Jacob is saying is that is illegal and that cannot
It's not.
happen.
Brian's
So that
saying
is
rules
illegal.
now, but if you change this thing, I guarantee it would be.
Well, you just change the rules. That's right. Mike Irwin says change the rules.
What do you mean there are no rules right now? There aren't. There are 0 rules on NIL
All
right
right,
now.
this is all right. All right. Well, there's still rules about what you can do at the university, but I understand where everyone's coming from here in this argument. For the sake of time, we are moving on from this argument and we are going to the next thing. And that is from Hob Hog, who wants to know, hearing any whispers out of spring practice on who is better than thought, or maybe not as good as hoped.
Okay, yes, Taylon Green threw a couple of touchdown passes. If you look at his numbers and would translate it to a game, I think it would translate to the #1 offense scoring about 28 points in a game. If you allowed for a field goal, they might score 31. So you're getting up there about where you want to be. So I don't think there was anything in that scrimmage that suggested the offense stinks, as some people think it will. I've been impressed with the entire offensive line all during spring. They pass block better. They hold their blocks better. They did seem to get along and do a better job. So I would say the offensive line performed well. You had a couple of running backs, Jaquindon Jackson, who's that kid from Utah, big physical senior, who came in and looked good, and then Braylon Russell, who's the true freshman. He's also a couple of big physical running backs, but have good speed for their size. Both looked good. And then the receivers, Andrew Armstrong and Isaiah Sategna, continue to look like the best 2 receivers, and they're both impressive in that scrimmage. Sategna caught a touchdown pass. Armstrong made the leaping over a player and caught it, and was an amazing catch.
Amazing.
And so there's that. And then on the defensive side, there's a Georgia transfer, I don't know how to say this, Jaheim Singletary.
Yeah,
he had a
that's
good
it.
day in the secondary. Pretty much all the defensive line was impressive. The linebackers looked good. So it was a good back and forth. So I don't think there's anybody out there that they're saying, oh man, he suddenly stinks. But there's a lot of people that are already jumping through and drawing attention because they're newcomers. And I will give Sam Pittman credit. I think they brought in the right people through the portal.
Yeah, and we'll see. Again, we only get so much that we're able to see during spring practice, and it can be hard to judge when they're going against each other, right? Be nice to get some other competition, like you've said a few times on the show.
Right.
I'd love to see a spring game against a different opponent, against
Yeah,
a real
it
other
would.
team. That'd be really cool. But I agree with some of your analysis there. Semper A. Hog on Hogfell asks, as I think back on last year's horrible performance by the O-line and Dan Enos' offense, it struck me that one of the issues may have been that they simply weren't able to perform when the plays took so long to develop.
Yeah, so have we seen evidence that the offense is not going to be like that? Well, it's not so much of holding blocks or anything like that. I just think that you're going to see the Petrino offense work better. And I think you're going to see the play calling. If you want to talk about Bobby Petrino as a play caller and Dan Enos as a play caller, I don't think there's going to be any comparison. But as far as holding the blocks, that's one of the things I've noticed.
Yeah.
They are holding blocks better. There was a drill on last Tuesday where I would call it a pass blocking, pass rush drill, where the entire O-line went against the entire D-line. They had a grad assistant stand back there in the pocket like he's the quarterback. And then I'm sitting there counting, and I'm going 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, 1,004. If you get to 4, you've given your quarterback enough time to look and find a receiver. And I saw that over and over again. Now, here's the one thing that disappoints me, because fans could see this themselves if they bothered. One of the things that we did in the media, and I know I was involved in this, we saw these fans start complaining last fall about the team. It stinks. Pittman shouldn't be come back. Oh, we got to go through all this nonsense. Yeah, the media will hype him up in the spring, and they'll tell us that everything's looking great, and it'll be bad again. So I think a lot of us started kind of lobbying publicly. We didn't go to Pittman one-on-one, but we started lobbying publicly, hey, you got a PR problem with your fans. Why don't you open it up this spring? Let them see this for themselves. I got tired of people saying that I was a mouthpiece for the athletic department. Okay, let's let you come in and see this. I won't say the offensive line looks better. You can come in and judge for yourself. So they have the scrimmage. Maybe 300 fans showed up, maybe a little more. Most of those were friends of the players or family members of the players. There were very few just fans showing up. So I'm reading Hogville, the message board.
Okay.
And these guys are having a discussion on which quarterback is the best based on stats from the scrimmage. And I got in the middle of that and I said, what do you mean judging a quarterback by stats from a scrimmage? This is the old way of doing things when you couldn't go to a scrimmage. You guys should have gone to the scrimmage and you could judge these quarterbacks based on what you saw with your own eyeballs. And you know what they said to me? Oh, we don't really care about this team, and they didn't entertain us. Until they're entertaining again, we're not going to go over there for anything. So my attitude is I'm not going to do anything in the future to help open this up for the fans. They clearly don't care.
Yeah.
And if you say, wait a minute, it's never been that way. Yes, about the first 15 years that I covered this program, spring scrimmages were open. You could go over and watch them. They'd have them in the stadium, and there'd be 3,000 fans show up for those things.
Yeah.
And I was always impressed. Then they started cracking down, and it got worse and worse. And it's been years since you could go in and watch a scrimmage in the spring. And all of a sudden, you had that opportunity, and you just went, we don't care.
Yeah.
So you missed that opportunity, and I'm not pushing for it again. I don't care.
Well, but here's the thing, Mike. They miss that. They're not going to the actual scrimmage, but then they're getting on social media and talking and dissecting this team
based on the stats.
Right. When they've had an opportunity to go and see for themselves. I'd respect a fan that was like, hey, I was there, and here is what I saw.
Sure.
Right? And then I'm going, okay.
I look forward to reading that feedback.
Me too.
Okay, I think the offensive line looks better, but if you go over and point out where they didn't or the mistakes, then maybe I'll go back and double check.
Yeah.
But I was looking forward to that kind of feedback. Didn't get it. Instead, we got fans basing their impression of the scrimmage on stats they're reading.
Yeah.
From somebody who went to the scrimmage, like a Trey Biddy or somebody like that, goes to the scrimmage, keeps stats, and puts it out there, and they get the stats and start debating the scrimmage based on the stats when they could have just gone and watched it.
Exactly. It's exhausting when you see those people who are like armchair analysts. Armchair analysts is what I call them, armchair coaches, whatever it is. When it's like you have an opportunity, Pittman has opened it up to say, hey, you don't have to trust the media, right? You don't have to trust what you and I are saying. You can go and see it for yourself. But instead, you're choosing not to.
Yeah,
so
and look,
to me, I'm like,
there are fans that aren't in the area that
True.
couldn't go see it. I understand that. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about fans that live in Northwest Arkansas that could have driven over there at 9 o'clock or whenever it was on a Saturday, whatever the exact time start was, and go in and watch that, and then they could have a debate based on their eyeballs instead of reading stats that somebody else put up for them.
I even say, even if you're not in Northwest Arkansas, if you're in Little Rock, if you're in wherever you are, you can drive up and go see the team. If it means that much to you, I would think that people would show up. That's just how I feel.
They didn't.
And exactly. Hog Redneck says, somebody mentioned to me that you once wrote a book about high school football, but somebody stole the manuscript. Wait, what? Sounds like a good story if it's true. Mike, you have not told me this story.
Well, I made a reference to it, and it's too complicated to explain. I put it up on Twitter in response to something. It's kind of a complicated story, but I just say when I was in the 7th grade, fall of 1960, my best friend and I started playing junior high football together. It was the first time to play under a coach, and we weren't even getting off the bench. I mean, we were playing nothing. We were just like, we were at practice dummies is what we were. So my buddy's in class one day, and he's just writing, and I know he's not paying any attention to the teacher, and he's writing. I'm going, what are you doing? So after class, I said, what is this? He says, I'm getting my frustrations out. I'm writing a book about high school football, a book that, and it's about guys in our situation. Only what he did was he wrote about these two guys that were freshmen and they weren't getting to play and they were sitting on the bench. And then all of a sudden after the first game and they lose, these two guys get hurt, the starting quarterback and the starting running back, and these two guys get to play. And they play and they're nervous and they don't win the game. But what he was implying in those first couple of chapters was they were going to get better. They were just freshmen. So I stepped in and said, well, let me write a chapter of this because I'm going to create another guy. So I created a guy that was a tight end, and his dad was an auto mechanic, and he was a good mechanic, but he was an alcoholic. and he a lot of times couldn't work, and so he's kind of considered. Some people thought he was. Some people swore by him because he fixed their cars. Wealthy people just take their car to the Chevy dealership and get the mechanic there to fix it. And so this guy was his son, and he was having to work just to help the family, and he wasn't maintaining his grades, and he was ineligible. But he got his act together when he realized the team needed, and he became eligible. And so he enters the season on the third game of the year. And when you get the two freshmen and him, and one of the freshmen can really throw the ball and the other's a good running back, the team suddenly gets better. And so we started creating situations where they're winning games now. This is making us feel better because we're not getting to play. But these guys are, our imaginary guys. And we sat down one day and I said to him, you know, we can't just have games. We got to do kind of what I did. We got to create problems that kids encounter. So my buddy creates this thing, and sometimes we made it up, sometimes we got it from our real life. When I was in elementary school, I got accused of hitting a teacher in the back of the head with a spitball, and I didn't do it. It was this other yo-yo kid that did it, but in those days, you didn't rat on somebody. So I just sat there, and he turns around, he goes, he did, he threw it, and then, so I got blamed for it. So I got my butt busted. So he puts that in there, only he creates this character, Gerald Johnston, and he's based on Gerald Williams, who was a Razorback at that time. I think he was a running back, and he bases it on him, and he's the guy that this happens to, and they bust his butt in front of the team. Well, he doesn't rat on the guy, but he waits for him outside the local malt shop, and when the kid in the band that did this to him comes in, hey, bud, let's go outside behind the malt shop. And everybody's staring out the window as he beats this guy up. So what happens for beating the guy up? He gets 5 more licks.
Oh,
so we just create things like this, you know, these stories. So we get all the way to the end of the year. Now, this tight end is really important to them, but he's got this girlfriend whose dad is like a local businessman, and he doesn't want his daughter to have anything to do with this son of an alcoholic mechanic. So he sent his daughter to this private high school, this private women's academy. It's women's only, and it's 20 miles away. And no guys can be on campus at night. After 5 o'clock, men can't be on campus. He's going over there and seeing her at night, talking to her, sitting outside of her dorm room and talking to her through the window and stuff.
Scandalous.
And they kept telling him, you guys, stop this, you're going to get caught. And he said, no, nobody's going to keep me away from my girlfriend. So he's over there. They're about to play their third playoff game. And if they win 3 more, they win the state championship. And it's going to. He's sitting there, and he's talking to her. And the security guard comes along and catches him, and he gets caught. And so they take him back over the next day to the school, and he gets suspended, and they lose the game.
Oh, no.
And so we debated this. We said, is this the way we want this to end? And we both agreed, yes, because life doesn't always win with something glorious and wonderful. Sometimes it just goes thud, and that's what happens to you.
You're going to end it with a bad ending?
We ended it with that. It cost them the state championship. And then you can ask yourself, who's the villain here? Is it the stupid daddy of the girl who won't let him see? I mean, who really is the villain here?
I feel like the villain, I haven't read it, but I feel like the villain is the tight end. He's his own villain.
Yeah,
he led his own downfalls.
Well, you could say that,
right?
but you could come up with different explanations. This is what we did. And there was a lot of other stuff in it. However, when we went off to college together, I didn't know this, but he had this manuscript. It was in 2 or 3 binders. It was about 300 pages. It was all handwritten. We didn't type it. Couldn't type. So we just wrote it. And he had it with him, and I didn't know it. So we get to college, and he's got it up on a shelf one day in our apartment. And a guy comes in and says, what's this? And starts reading. He goes, man, this is really good. So he reads it. Then he gives it to one of his friends, and he reads it. And then he gives it to another friend and another friend. And then all of a sudden, this one guy that we sort of knew gave it to a guy we didn't know, and we're going, when are we getting this back? And he goes, oh, I'll get it back from him. He's reading it, and then all of a sudden he comes in and goes, he dropped out of school, and I don't really know him, and I don't know where he went. And we never saw the manuscript again.
Oh, no.
So here's what I will conclude. Have you ever seen the movie Varsity Blues?
I have not.
Well, if you go see that movie, I'm not saying it's an exact copy of what we wrote, but it's very similar. When I saw that movie, I went, this is sort of what we were writing about. And I always wondered, did this guy go off and give this to somebody, and then he gave it to somebody else, and 30 or 40 years later they got it and went, hey, let's sort of make a movie based on that. And they would rewrite it, but create that.
But the idea was there, and it was from you guys.
The idea was there, so.
Wow.
I don't know what happened to it. I told him about 2 weeks ago, I said, hey, you're retired, just start writing it again. And then you write the first 2 chapters just like and then you send it to me and I'll write the 3rd chapter and we'll just go like we did before. I said, I can remember some of it. And he was pretty smart. Here's what he said to me. We wrote that in 1960 and 61. We're not the same people now that we were back then. We're not around the same people. We don't talk the same way. We wouldn't have dialogue be the same. We couldn't create 1961 Texas high school football. It would be a different book.
Well,
and
that's a bummer.
This is his reason for not doing it.
That's a bummer because I want to read it now. You've made me so interested.
Well, you can't read it. I just told you a summary of some of it, but
I know, but I want to read the full thing, and I'm annoyed at the person who stole it from you. I'm going to go watch Varsity Blues, though.
go watch it. I watched it last night.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to have to go watch it. What'd you watch it on? Just a TV? Just
I don't
streaming
know.
service?
Yeah, it was a streaming thing. I don't know
Okay.
what it was.
All right, I'll go look it up. I want to go watch it now, and I'll let you know what I think of it. But I'm going to say it's always been your idea, okay? That's
Well, I don't know that was based on that. It was just similar to our book.
okay.
There are certainly differences in it.
Similar. We're gonna go with it's your idea. I'm gonna make that a real thing. I'm gonna believe that. That's gonna do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.